Right, with that, changing topics entirely, do you really understand the outcomes that you're trying to get for your customers? We all talk about like outcomes, but do you really understand what it is that you're trying to achieve for your customers? Vidya's going to come join us and tell us about how you can understand those things better. So I met Vidya at the Product Leaders Summit. So we've been lucky enough to go to 2 conferences in the last few weeks. The Product Leaders Summit up in San Francisco, which Dan is involved in organizing as well. Highly recommend it. It's for product leaders. If you're a CPO, head of product, VP product, talk to Vidya and Dan about that conference. It's really amazing. But apart from that, Vidya is a seasoned product leader and the founding partner at Product Rebels, which is a firm dedicated to empowering teams to build products that customers love. She's a co-author of Groundwork, Getting Better at Making Better Products, and co-hosts the podcast, originally named Product Rebels. But Vidya is normally based in the US, but she's actually a local from here in Wellington. So let's go wild and crazy for Vidya.
Thank you so much. As Anthony just said, it's just so incredible to be in a room with all of you product people in Wellington. This is my hometown. I'm so excited, and thank you to Anthony, to DJ, to Taz, and to Tokes for putting this incredible conference on. So, Anthony mentioned that a couple of months ago we were together in San Francisco, and I asked him, what is it like? What's product management in New Zealand? What's the state of it? And he actually painted a pretty dire picture. He talked about it's pretty tough. It's been tough for the last year and a half. But also it's more around not just the economy and the businesses, but how people are feeling about their craft and how people are being valued or not valued. And so that's really where this comes from. So my customer that I'm talking to right now is if you're feeling like you're a bit of a feature factory, if you're feeling like this is tough and what am I doing and how do I get out of this, my message is for you. So that's who I'm aiming for. But I'm starting somewhere a little bit different. Who here has played field hockey? Awesome, it's my tribe. I did. I played field hockey up through high school in Wellington Girls, up the road, for those of you, and playing up in Mount Albert. And so I was thrilled when my middle daughter, and I live in Southern California, field hockey is not a sport they know. So they introduced it, and she decided, all of her own accord, to take this up. So there she is, has been practicing, and it's the first game of the season. She's in the varsity team at high school. And all the parents are there, like we're super excited, and everyone's cheering, and we get smashed. It's like 12-0. It's one of those scores you kind of don't want to remember anymore. It was ugly, but you're like, it's okay, like brush yourself off, right? Second game comes along, it's kind of as bad. Smashed again, third game, fourth game, fifth game. And all the time, the coach is making them get up at 5:30 in the morning, and they're going to practice, and game after game after game, they're getting destroyed. So one morning, we as parents took turns, because it's 5:30 in the morning, we take them breakfast. And, after 6 losses in a row, it was Halloween, they're practicing at 5:30, I bring them breakfast. And I decide to hang out and listen to the coach, because I want to know what she's doing. And what really blew me away is that she focused for the first 30 minutes on mindset. She talked about your attitude to the game, what you needed to bring, how you thought about this. 30 minutes. Then she moved on to talking about the people around, the team, and their role as coaches, as leadership. And then they did one other thing. The rest of the time, they practiced not fancy drills, not plays. They focused on the fundamentals. They ran so much, they were throwing up. And all they did was practice a pass and a stop. For those of you in field hockey, it starts there. It's the fundamentals. That's all she did. And something started happening after game 7, but I'm going to tell you the end of that story in a little bit. What I want to talk about is this idea. Now, Michael Jordan probably never played field hockey. I don't know. The fact that I'm talking about sports at all is kind of like pretty funny if you know me. But I love this quote. In terms of the proper technique in focusing on preparation. Bottom falls out when you're not focused on fundamentals. So let's talk about that and bring it back to product management. And what does it feel like when the bottom is coming out of your job, when you feel like the bottom is falling out? Well, the first thing is that it feels like, and I thought it was pretty funny that we talked about just now, that really cool energizer, by the way, about priorities and saying no. One of the ways that you feel like the bottom is falling out is that you've got too much to do. It's way too many priorities, and not only that, it's way too many number one priorities. So that's the first thing. Then your roadmap, instead of feeling like a product roadmap and value for the business or for the customer, it's a list of features which then gets shuffled around probably every sprint or every month because it's just a list of features. So you're like playing the shuffle game with your roadmap. Your decisions feel like they're being constantly overturned. You think you know where you're going, and then something comes in and it changes up again. Is this resonating? Yeah? I know, I'm telling you, it's going to get better. I feel like the morning was so positive, and here I am going, oh my God, this is how life is. But it will get better, I promise. You know, what happens is then it's like these debates on what's important, and it's like nothing worse than that. Like here we are as product people representing the customer, and instead you feel like a referee around what's more important to do, which then leaves us little or sometimes no time to talk to customers, which is kind of the first love that we all had as product managers. And finally, it's when we start feeling like a project manager. Right? You're feeling like you are just pushing features through, watching dates, watching launches, and putting new dates on your roadmap. This is what it feels like when the bottom falls out. So we wanted to find out, like, how pervasive is this? Like, what's happening? Like, we're hearing this. I'm a product coach. We talk to different teams. So we started talking to product managers. This is all in the US. But we asked them, what is the biggest issue? Like, what's keeping you up at night? What's the number one thing that's keeping you up at night? I don't want to qualify this because we talked to a lot of different people, but we've narrowed this. The survey that I'm going to show you is really around B2B and B2C, and it's across multiple industries. But we took out the 500 people, so this is just 500, that work in either medium or larger. And I think that's important because I didn't want it to be an anomaly, like an early stage or you're a single product manager. These are teams. This is when you have a team of people and you're more than one product manager. So this is what they said. Over 60% told us it was hard to prioritize. I mean, that's a really tough thing, right? If you think 65% of product managers of the 500 we surveyed in bigger companies tell me that they can't prioritize, and you can see that the other reasons are pretty linked, right? It's like when you say it's hard to say no to new features, it's your boss, it's your salesperson, it's maybe your board coming to you and you can't say no. It's like, again, back to feeling overwhelmed. You're in these overwhelming opinion-based debates. Again, over 40%. And then finally, and this was sort of heartbreaking, is that teams are really confused. So our product managers are sitting here going, it feels bad. I'm coming to my team and I'm supposed to be the person leading, and it's hard for them to know exactly what we're doing next. So I want to find out if one of these, a minimum of one, if you've experienced in the last 3 months, put your hand up. Oh, breaks my heart. Okay, keep your hand up if it's more than 2. Yeah? So I'm seeing some of the similar numbers, like about 65%. This is a really tough place for us to be, and this is why it feels like we're working in feature factories. We're doing the work. Like, none of us are sitting around idle. We're working like crazy, producing output, but we're not necessarily feeling like we're delivering what is the most important to the business or to the customer. Okay, so how do we get out of this? By the way, the feature factory term was coined by John Cutler, and if you haven't followed him, I think he's a really interesting person to listen to. He actually outlined 12 different ways that you can feel like you're working in a feature factory, and highly recommend it as an aside. But I want to get to, like, how do we get out of this, right? That's the bottom, guys. We're going to climb back up again. And for that, I'm going back to hockey. I'm going back to what the coach did. And she talked about mindset. She talked about what I'm going to call resources. And she talked about skills. And I'm going to say, let's draw the equivalent for us in terms of how we get out of this feeling like we're in a feature factory. It's focusing on those three things. And that's how we're going to go back to what we want to do, which is to be a customer-centric product manager. Okay, so the first thing, let's talk about mindset. And when you think about this, remember, it's an attitude. It's how you feel when you're coming into work. It's the demeanor that you put on when you're coming into work. It's in your head, it's not showing, but it comes up in everything that you do. And one of the first attitudes is that we represent the customer in all decisions. Now, in Product Rebels, we talk about flying the customer flag. It's in our logo. And I want you to think about, like, am I doing that? And you can. It's a mindset, it's an approach, it's an attitude around, I am representing the customer. The more that we empathize with the customer, the more effective that we're going to be. Again, it's an attitude. Like that idea of empathy and connection. It's not just about learning. We had so many good talks this morning, and I'm hoping some of this is brought together with the way that you think about showing up at work. And then finally, we keep learning. This isn't a one-off deal. This isn't customer discovery. This isn't an activity. It's this idea of constantly learning to understand the customer problem. So that's a mindset perspective. This is where we get to winning. Resources for the product leaders in the room, I'm going to point to you for this. This is where the coach, when she was like, it's about the team and it's about me supporting you. That's for the product leader. What we want to do is we want to clear the way. Over half of the product teams that we coach, over half, and we work with some really big industries and companies, over half say they're not allowed to talk to a customer. That's your product leader job. They need to clear the way so that you can access the customer. And they're absolutely, I haven't found a case yet where we haven't been able to do that. So challenge your product leader, because that's their job, to help you as a product manager get to that customer. The second thing, and this is really interesting, if I ask product leaders, hey, is your team confident in your leadership? It's a really tough question to answer. Some will say yes, sort of like uncertainly, but do you know? Have you asked them? Where's the gaps? When's the last time you got a 360 done on you as a product leader? Because what you need is you need your team believing in you. And if there are gaps, go find out what those are and go address them. I told you this is tough love for the product leaders. And the last one is, again, a surprise. 2/3 of the teams that we talk to don't have a community of practice. This is so easy. All it means is that you get together once a month. You go to a product tank together here in Wellington with Tokes. You go up in Auckland with Anthony. You go down in Christchurch with Taz. That's easy. You just get together for lunch and you talk about product. A community of practice means that you are not alone, that you have each other. So I want to see every product team just be able to very, very easily put that together. Okay, mindset, resources. Now we're coming to skills. So Customer-Centric says these are fundamentals. And I built a business on the fundamentals because it's really fun and sexy to talk about all the cool things that you do at strategy and roadmaps, et cetera, et cetera. But nothing matters if you don't have the fundamentals right. So this is a little bit more of a take on some things that you've heard again around the problem space. So the first thing is that we use data and research. And I want to say it's customer data and customer research. So you as a customer representative, how are you talking about the customer? How are you bringing that person, your customer, into every conversation that you have? Are you using the right prioritization method? There's not just one. You know, we come into teams and like, oh, it's all about rice, or it's all about X, or it's all about Y. Depending on where you are, you've got to choose a different prioritization method. Either you're doing a directional priority because you just want to know, like you want enough to be like, I'm going in the right direction. That's a really simple, very, very simple, very easy prioritization, all the way to something that's much more data, much more scientific, if that's what your culture needs. But it's not one size fits all. So go back and take a look. Fundamental skill, know how you're moving forward, know how you're making that decision, and it's not one tool to rule them all. Last, we're going to apply the right method and technique, and this is where it's back to that customer problem. And I want to spend the rest of the time talking about that customer problem because that's really, I think, is the heart of this. And I want, again, for those of you feeling like you're in a feature factory, to have a different way to approach this. So you probably have seen this before. It's a pretty well-known statement. People don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. Great. This was quoted way back in, I think, the 1960s by Theodore Levitt. And I'm going to argue that this doesn't go anywhere near as far, and in fact, it's part of the problem why we are solution-focused, what Dan talked about this morning. I think this is part of the problem. We think we take a step towards the problem, and we stop short. So our job is to keep going. So let's talk about why that's so important. It's really easy for us to talk about solutions. We've heard your speakers this morning talk about this. Which means if you talk about solutions, invariably, you're going to have a list of features, right? You are putting yourself in the position. The minute that you allow the conversation to be around the solution, it means that you default to a set of features. So how do we do this? Well, what we can do is we can force ourselves to talk in the language of challenges. And I'm going to tell you, what I want you to think about is not just one problem statement, but I want you to force yourself, anytime you hear a customer, to get 4 to 5 problems that they have. We think about this as diverging, and it's in design thinking, it's in a lot of different places, and problem spaces and solution spaces, but here's the trick. Force yourself to get at least 5 problem statements. Because once you've done that, you've truly explored. You haven't got to the first pseudo problem statement that your customer has. You're going to say, I want a 5. I am going to go through and find out more, which then allows you to pick the most important one. And that gets you out of these debates because you can talk about multiple problems and that you've chosen a specific one. So find yourself at least 5. So let's talk about this in conjunction with this quarter-inch drill, quarter-inch hole. Let's talk about, I'm going to keep on with the drill and the hole. So I live in an apartment, it's a customer, and I want to hang a picture. Great, okay? You can't stop there. Often this is where you're like, okay, that's the definition of a problem. I'm ready to go. We want to solve problems. Like all of us in this room love doing this. This is kind of like why we do these jobs, but you've got to push. So what are you doing in terms of being able to hang a picture? Is it a small picture that's really simple? Or did you just buy this incredibly beautiful piece of art that you've been saving up for years and that's what you're putting up? What's your customer trying to do? Let's keep going. Are they renting? Which means they have barriers about what they can do on their walls? Or are they owning their home? How do they feel about that? So, if you think about this, there's such a range of options in terms of what your customer can do. And in fact, there are over 208, this is an aside, but I found it fascinating, 208 products that Command has for different ways that you can put things on walls. That came out of a whole different set of needs. Okay, so let's go back to this then. How do you get to really thinking about the right, what is this really about? Well, the first thing, there's 3 steps. The first is that you want to get super clear on the problem that you want to solve. And so the first step is, what kind of picture are we hanging, asking why, going deeper. And it's so surprising because most people can't actually articulate a problem. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to challenge you. I'm going to give you a template. Like there's a QR code for this as well. It's coming. But I want to give you a template and ask you, can you fill that out? Can you articulate the problem in the depth that it's needed. Then we want to know our customer. This is beyond the demographics, right? This is beyond, like, I know that persona sometimes sort of is like an ugly word, but really I think we need to like take back the word persona. I think we need to own it as product people, not as a designer, not as a marketer. We need to know them inside and out. The psychographic profile, like where do they live? What's happening? Because when you do that, now we get a sense of, is it an apartment? Is it brick? Is it wood? Where is this picture being hung? That's the kind of depth that we'll get to know this customer in. And then here's the nuance. A lot of the time, we try and glom together a bunch of needs into a set of customers because we want to use our solution to solve for multiple segments. That doesn't work. That's what leads to failure. Instead, I want you to think about a pairing of problem and customer. And so they're individualized needs that make that possible. So then you've got a specific product for a specific customer who has a specific need. So if you're dealing with a number of customers, if you've got many customer segments, think about how you really differentiate, how you break those down, and how you separate them out, because then you can start prioritizing, you can start making trade-offs. That's the key. That third piece nobody talks about because we just want to kind of grow faster. I think you need to take a step back in order to be able to actually delight every customer that you serve. Okay. So I want to share our framework for how we think about this. It's called groundwork. Our terms for this is a convergent problem statement. And you'll see why I said that, because I asked you to think about 4 or 5 problems before you narrow down. We're going to give you a way to do that. An actionable persona, which means that you can actually make a decision based on your customer. So instead of you dealing with a bunch of arguments and opinions, you're representing the customer and you're talking on behalf of that customer. You can take action based on this. And then the last is this individualized needs, this idea that you are pairing up the problem and the customer. Okay, and so there's a few other pieces that go with this. There's 3 practices, there's 3 pillars. And in order to do that, we support this idea of you're thinking in hypotheses, you're doing really fast research, like in an hour, learning enough to make a decision, and then bringing the team along with you. So those are the pieces of groundwork. If we do this, we crawl out of that, the bottom. This is how we get to the light. This is how we kind of like win. The first is this idea of articulating the customer problem, which I've talked about. Being able to translate what you see and hear. So I'm going to ask you, how many people have actually, like, I know you've talked about talking to a customer. Who's actually gone and visited them? Who's actually gone and observed them? Okay, it should be every single person in this room. It's funny because I too was at Intuit for a really long time. And we had this concept called follow me home. And I know that sounds super creepy, but when you ask people, it's not that bad. And we would get into their apartments, into their homes, into their offices, and we would watch. That is, it unlocks the ability to empathize. It unlocks the ability to truly understand your customer. So next time you're on a call, when you get back next week, think about, how do I actually get in front of a customer? Can I come visit you? Can I come see what you're doing? That is so much easier than asking a set of questions. I want you to differentiate between the different types of customers. And so then you can talk about the highest priority problem. And the really, really fun thing is, when you do this, when you present your team with the problem, all of you together, and this is best practice, you're ideating that solution. It's not you jumping to, okay, now I've done the problem space, I can move. It's all of us together being able to do that. It really makes life fun. And I would tell you, this is the key to customer-centric success. So on Monday, okay, so now let's just talk about, you're completely bought in, you're enthused, you're coming back to your desk on Monday. I want you to think about how you can answer the question, what customer problem are we trying to solve? And I'm going to challenge you to download the template, to give it to every single person on your team, have them do it separately, and then compare. are you actually solving the same problem? And I'll put money on it that I bet you're going to find that every single person has a slightly different version of the problem statement. Because if you don't articulate it, people will make up their own mind about what problem they think they're solving. And that's where the alignment and everything falls apart. So go do that. Just go see. It won't hurt. Tell me, if you find that every single person answers it the same way, I want to know. You'll be the first. The next thing is to look at the problem from the customer perspective, and that's where I want you to find your customer or a prospect and go visit them, go see them, go actually visit them in their environment. And you'll find that it really shifts the debate, because the passion that you bring, the conviction of having watched someone, is going to change the dialogue with your leadership. And finally, when you think about your problem statement, one of the biggest issues that we see is that a lack of your solution is not the problem. So when you write your problem statement, really be critical of making sure there's no hint or smell or anything of a solution. It's got to purely be the customer problem. Okay, so with that, a couple of things. Of course, there's a QR code for all the templates. Every one of the templates for the pillars and the practices are there. I welcome you to do this. I really, really want you to do that problem statement with your team on Monday. We have a podcast with product leaders. So if you want to hear product leaders doing tough things and actually standing up for the customer, Product Rebels is the podcast that Anthony referred to. And I gave a workshop a couple of days ago, and I've got 3 books left. So come talk to me. You might get a book, okay? So that's the break. That's your challenge and break. Come find me. And please reach out to me at that address. Now, I promised you I'd tell you the end of the story. So here's what happened. You know, we're sitting here, and it's game 7, and they start winning. It's game 8. It's game 9. They start winning. They win and win and win. And what happens at the end of the season, and I know this sounds like a Disney movie, and I promise you it's true, but they end up winning the entire division. But that 5:30 in the morning, that 5:30 practice in the morning, the day before the last match of the championship, because of course I had to go see what she was doing. Did she change? Did she change a play? Did she come up with these fancy moves, these fancy drills? Nope. She focused on mindset. She brought them all back to what's the attitude that we have, what's the attitude that we're bringing into the game tomorrow. They knew they had the support of their team around them, and those coaches were right there. Those 2 coaches at the end, there every step of the way. They knew they had their leadership, had their back. And what did they do for the next hour and a half? They practiced drills. So I'm telling you, if you get the fundamentals down and you focus on those, everything that you do will get better. Thank you very much.